Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are strapping in for a really exhaustive look at one of the oldest, most fundamental human capabilities, language.
That's right.
We're diving deep into this tension between our, desperate desire to control our words, the inevitable mistakes we all make, and the truly vast consequences, both social and spiritual, that our speech carries.
It's a fascinating mix of sources we have today. I mean, we've gathered these ancient wisdom texts that treat the control of the tongue as like the ultimate spiritual goal.
Right.
And we're going to contrast those with some really modern academic analyses of, well, linguistic engineering and even the cultural meaning of the digital undo button.
So the core mission here is to understand why language, across these dramatically different contexts, remains this primary measure of self-mastery.
Exactly.
We're going to explore why controlling your speech is often seen as this pinnacle of perfection. Then we'll look at the severe, very practical dangers of quick, unfiltered talk.
And then finally, we get to see the surprising, the profound power that's held in the simplest conversational phrases.
It feels like it connects everything.
It does. Every decision, every relationship, every political outcome,
Yeah.
it's all mediated by the weight and I think the intent of the words we choose, or maybe the words we fail to choose.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Let's start with that highest possible standard we found in the sources. This pretty radical idea that controlling one's speech is directly linked to mastering the entire self.
Right.
And this isn't just about good manners, is it? This is about total internal discipline.
Exactly. Our sources really zero in on this through an analysis of a specific text, James 3.2, which just sets the expectation bar ridiculously high.
Right.
It begins with this premise of universal fault. It just acknowledges that everybody, without exception, stumbles in many ways. That's the baseline.
We all slip up.
We all slip up. It's just human imperfection.
So we're starting from a place of guaranteed failure. But then the sources present this hypothetical, almost impossible benchmark for what true perfection would look like.
And the standard is actually very simple. If someone could completely control their speech, I mean, if they could live a life where they never, ever offended with their words.
Which is impossible.
Right, impossible. But if they could, that person, the text concludes, would be considered perfect and fully capable of controlling their entire body. The tongue is the test. It's the ultimate lever.
That is a powerful analogy. It's like saying if you can control the rudder, you can steer the whole ship.
That's it.
If you can harness the tongue, you can harness your entire life.
Mm.
But here's my question. Isn't demanding perfection through speech, well, isn't it inherently demoralizing? How do the sources deal with that tension of setting such an unattainable goal?
They deal with it precisely by emphasizing how difficult it is. The high bar isn't meant to condemn you, but to clarify what's at stake.
Ah.
The control of the tongue is presented as the crucial sign of spiritual and, emotional maturity. The sources imply that if you're struggling with self-control in general, with anger or lust or anything else, it will show up immediately in your speech.
Why there first?
Because the tongue has the least latency between thought and action.
It's the ultimate measure of latency management, that ability to slow down the process between an impulse and then expressing it.
Precisely. And by highlighting how incredibly difficult this mastery is, the sources position it as a goal to aspire to. It's an encouragement to strive for that greater control over your verbal output, knowing that success there signals a much deeper success in regulating your entire character.
That makes a lot of sense. So the goal isn't necessarily 100% perfection, but the continuous striving for control in the most difficult domain.
Mm-hmm.
But let's shift from that staggering spiritual ideal to the practical daily consequences that unfold when we fail, even a little bit. Our sources have some powerful wisdom literature, particularly from Proverbs, that spells out the immediate real-world peril of hasty speech.
And this is where it moves from abstract ideals to the everyday battleground of communication. It immediately contrasts two archetypes: the wise man and the fool.
Okay.
The wise man keepeth it in till afterwards. He allows time for reflection. He holds back until the moment is right, or maybe he just never says it at all.
He drafts his thought and saves it as a draft before hitting send.
Exactly that. He applies a filter. But the fool uttereth all his mind. There's no consideration of context, consequence, or timing. Whatever occurs to him instantly becomes public. And the warning here about haste is, it's just astonishingly severe.
Give us the specific warning.
The text highlights that a man who is hasty in his words, so who speaks before the information is even settled, is in such deep peril that there is more hope of a fool than of him.
Wow. Think about that.
I mean, think about that hierarchy of doom. The person who lacks basic intelligence is considered better off than the person who is simply too fast. The sin of speed is greater than the sin of ignorance.
That really brings an ancient text into the 21st century. It's a profound warning against instant communication. The danger isn't the content, it's the speed.
It is.
Every social media reply, every rapid-fire email written in anger, that's the modern peril of the man who is hasty in his words.
And the chaos doesn't stop at the individual. The sources detail how this unchecked speech creates widespread social and political damage. These personal failures just immediately ripple out.
How does personal anger become civic strife?
Well, an angry man stirreth up strife, the sources note, and a furious man aboundeth in transgression. Your anger isn't self-contained, it's like an infectious agent.
Right.
Moreover, scornful men sow, those who treat others with contemptuous words, they're said to bring a city into a snare. Their judgmental, dismissive language just erodes trust. It poisons the public sphere.
It makes constructive conversation impossible.
Impossible. And it's not just explicitly negative speech that's dangerous. There's also this deep caution against manipulative language, specifically flattery.
Right, flattery.
Flattery is a subtle act of linguistic aggression. A man that flattereth his neighbor spreadeth a net for his feet.
A net for his feet.
It might sound smooth, like linguistic butter, but it's always designed to gain an advantage. The words are empty of genuine affirmation and just full of strategic deceit. It's not generosity, it's a future debt collection.
And to link this back to self-control, the sources really emphasize that you have to be receptive to feedback about your speech. The danger of ignoring correction is catastrophic.
If you are often reproved but you hardeneth his neck, the consequence is stark. Destruction suddenly, and that without remedy.
Wow.
You have to maintain a softness toward correction. If you refuse the input, you've basically closed the only path you have to self-mastery.
And the sources connect this private character directly to public stability. The text is so clear. When the wicked beareth rule, the people mourn, but when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice.
Yes, the integrity of the leader's speech and judgment is absolutely paramount. The righteous leader considereth the cause of the poor, while the wicked just ignore it, and a king establishes the land by judgment.
So if the leader is hasty in their words?
The entire city falls into that snare.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because we move from ancient imperatives about restraint, that words are indelible, they're irreversible, to the modern digital world where we are actively trying to undo our mistakes. I'm thinking about that glorious undo typing prompt, or the ability to delete a message before it's even read. That is the modern luxury of retracting words instantly.
It's the ultimate linguistic fantasy, isn't it? We built the technology to give us the control the ancients only dreamed of.
Yeah.
But our sources introduce this fascinating analytical counterpoint. Cases where words are intentionally engineered to be disruptive, they can't be easily undone, even if you could hit delete. We are now talking about sophisticated linguistic engineering.
Linguistic engineering. That sounds like the deliberate weaponization of syntax and structure. What's the objective?
The primary goal is what they call cognitive disruption. The aim is to force the reader to slow down, to stop the automated, speedy consumption of text that we do every day.
Okay, so you're forcing them off autopilot.
Exactly. We usually see language as a transparent medium. We look through the words to get the meaning. But this kind of engineering makes the language itself the problem that you have to actively work to decode. It stops you in your tracks.
So it's the opposite of a well-designed IKEA manual.
That's a great way to put it, yes. It's designed to make you struggle with the instructions, and the sources detail a few specific methods for this.
Let's hear them. Start with the tiger fragment.
Okay, the tiger fragment uses circular logic. It weaves arguments that fold back on themselves, making it impossible to reach a stable conclusion through linear A to B thinking.
So you get stuck in a loop.
You get stuck. And by intentionally jamming your cognitive system with that circularity, it exposes the inadequacy of relying only on simple cause and effect reasoning. You're forced to confront the limits of your own processing speed.
So the language itself becomes a mirror reflecting the limits of my own understanding. What about the daggers and queens piece?
That one achieves disruption through blatant grammatical corruption. It deliberately breaks the rules of syntax, of coherence, sometimes even spelling.
Hi.
This intentional breaking of the rules is designed to reveal the underlying power structures in language itself, the implicit biases and societal norms we internalize just by speaking correctly. When the language breaks, you have to think about why the rules mattered in the first place.
And finally, there's a structural approach.
The piece called Topographics uses radical physical structure, often perfect symmetry in its form. The source describes this as creating semantic vertigo.
Semantic vertigo.
Yeah, a dizzying effect where the physical structure of the text destabilizes the meaning. If the text looks identical upside down or mirrored, the meaning becomes unstable because the form is actively fighting the content. It's a deliberate effort to destabilize your expectation that meaning is fixed.
So we've gone from seeking perfect self-control in our words, through the chaos caused by failing to pause, and now into the deliberate creation of communicative chaos.
It shows the incredible range of human intent in communication, doesn't it? And that contrast between the digital undo and this engineered disruption is profound. In one case, we're fleeing from consequence. In the other, we're deliberately using consequence to force deeper reflection.
So what does this all mean for us, day to day? We're navigating this ancient pressure of consequence and the modern luxury of the delete button. Let's pivot to one small, profoundly positive phrase that shows the power of simple, intentional speech. You're welcome.
This simple exchange, following thank you, seems purely mechanical, but the analysis in the sources reveals this immense depth. Socially, it's a tiny, powerful act.
What specifically does it carry?
It carries warmth, belonging, acceptance, and relation. The analysis emphasizes that when it's offered sincerely, it is not mechanical. It establishes a connection beyond the transaction of whatever the favor was. It says, I acknowledge your gratitude and I accept it as part of our shared relationship.
And then the analysis goes even deeper into a spiritual dimension. How does that simple phrase tap into a spiritual context without getting, preachy?
Well, the premise is that gratitude itself is the recognition of something given. To say thank you is fundamentally to recognize the existence of gift in existence itself.
The recognition that not everything is earned.
Exactly. That much is received. Therefore, to say you're welcome is to participate actively in what the source calls the circulation of gift.
It's a mutual, humble recognition of abundance and relationship.
It is. In this context, gratitude and welcome are seen as these echoes of the larger relationship between, say, the finite human experience and the infinite. It's an acknowledgement that we are beneficiaries, not just creators. And when you look at it through that lens, your welcome becomes a small sacrament of recognition.
It transforms a brief social transaction into a really profound moment.
A moment of acceptance.
What an incredible journey through our sources.
Yeah.
We started with this absolute ideal, achieving perfection by controlling every word. We examined the ancient warnings about the societal chaos caused by hasty and manipulative talk, and then we saw the modern tension between the luxury of that digital undo typing button and the intentional linguistic disruption used to slow us down and force us to think.
It all comes down to form versus intent, really. The core takeaway is that true self-mastery, it lies not just in understanding the content of our words, but in mastering the intent behind them.
Right.
Are we striving for that high bar of self-control, exercising restraint like the wise man who pauses? Or are we intentionally offering warmth and acceptance?
And finally, we saw how that personal control ripples outward into public governance. The texts connect private virtue caring for the poor, maintaining wisdom to public stability. A king establishes the land by judgment.
Yeah.
So if the wise man keeps his mind till afterwards, and a leader has to judge faithfully, this raises a final provocative thought for you to mull over. What small measure of self-control today over a single hasty, angry, or scornful word could have the largest ripple effect in your own life?
Think about that high-stakes moment before you hit send, or before you speak out of haste. Is there more hope for the fool, or is there hope in the deliberate restraint you choose to exercise?
We'll be back soon with the next deep dive. Thank you for listening.